Hi, we're Quentin Cures Williams. My name is James. Today is Friday, and I got a text message from my mother this morning. And it said, question, my book club slash mahjong friends were wondering what makes a book a classic. Uh, so, um, that's a fair question. And I figured I would just make a little video and talk about that. There's, if you look around on YouTube, there's a lot of uh, videos that say what makes a book a classic, and they will tell you things pretty similar to what I'm about to say. So there's differences of opinion, but the short version is it's a book that has kind of stood the test of time. So usually this is going to mean it's quite old, and it also means that it has probably been in print for a long time, is often reprinted. You can almost always find a copy of it if you need it, and that it has influenced readers and writers and artists and musicians since it came out. So, kind of the old kind of baseline definition of classics, like if you were to go to university and study classics, in the classics department when they still had those, then you would be reading the works of the ancient Romans and Greeks in the original language. So you'd be studying ancient Greek to read Homer and Sophocles and Plato, and you'd study Latin so you could read Virgil and Ovid and Livy in the original. I think in some classics department you might also study ancient Hebrew, so you could read the Old Testament and associated texts. So this sort of thing still does go on, and but for a long time that was the basis of almost all Western education, was reading these old texts. Now, because so many of the educated people, the people most likely to write books later in their life, read these same things, they had kind of a store of shared knowledge, references that they could make when they referred to Cassandra or Agamemnon. People knew who these people were and what the stories about them were. It worked, right? So in that sense, a classic is something that is old and has influenced people down the line. There's also classics that are more recent, and so something like To Kill a Mockingbird, not especially old, it's from the '60s, but widely read. People know those characters either from the book or from the movie that was made out of it. Um, you'll see reference to it in other kinds of pop culture. People can refer to Atticus Finch or whatever, and a lot of people know that, right? With 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 education kind of becoming a little less monolithic, I guess, uh, and with some of the postmodern suspicion of things like canons and classics and such, there are fewer of these things that you can assume that everyone has read. When I was in high school, and I didn't go to a fancy private school or anything. I went to public school, but we read the Odyssey. So pretty much people would know what was in the Odyssey. I don't know if they read the Odyssey in high school anymore. We read the Scarlet Letter. I don't know if they read that anymore. But there are things that become sort of modern classics. Great Gatsby, um, uh, like I said, To Kill a Mockingbird is another one. Or I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. These are books that people will keep reading. Now, how far in the future are people going to keep reading these books is hard to say. I had a list of the most important English novels from 100 years ago. This was in the New York Times. It was from like the I think 1914. They did one of their periodic lists, of these are the important books, and their number one pick, based on the opinions of several contemporary authors, was Vanity Fair. Most of the others were also similarly well known. I think David Copperfield was a top one. Ivanhoe was a top one. And something like Ivanhoe is kind of falling off a bit, in popularity and regard. Fenimore Cooper, still a classic, but not as widely read. But then things, on the other hand, will kind of get rediscovered sometimes. So this article that I was talking about from the Times, from the 1914 or whatever, was sort of before the rediscovery of Moby Dick, which when it came out was not very was not widely read, but it was revived, was rediscovered in the 20th century. And I don't think any American reader today would say Moby Dick is not a classic, because it certainly is. So things can be lost classics. It's kind of funny to talk about things like forgotten classics. So this is a phrase you'll hear. So can something be old and important and influential and also forgotten? It's a good question. Maybe it is not, in fact, a classic. Or maybe it's more of a niche classic. So, I think most people would say Sherlock Holmes is a classic. It's a classic of the detective genre. It's also really good. So maybe we put that into the broader category of a classic these days, even though it's not like Homer classic. It's not like the Bible classic, but it's certainly very widely read and very influential. Agatha Christie as well, also a classic author. But when you get into things, take something more modern, like science fiction, like Dune. So Dune, people who love modern science fiction would say that is a classic, but it's also kind of niche, right? So, are there modern classics? Yes, there are, but it's not the same as a classic. I guess another way you could say is something a classic is, does it have the word classics printed on the spine? So here's a Penguin classic, right? So this is a series that reprints books, that are classics. You've probably seen this kind of book around a lot. And things that are in the Penguin classic line, those are probably, some exceptions that we all know about, that are probably safe to say, yeah, that's a classic. Or, there's the modern library classics. So here's Treasure Island, right? And when Treasure Island came out, probably not considered a likely classic, because it's a young person's book. It's an adventure story. But it's certainly been very influential. Now there's a modern company that a lot of people who I watch will know, called the New York Review of Books Classics, and they print books with these very kind of these monochrome spines and this square box on the cover. They all kind of have a similar look to them, right? And they do what they would call modern classics mostly. So these are books that have gone out of print, but have mostly been published in the late 1800s and in the 1900s, and but are worth revisiting, worth knowing. So this is Speedboat by Renata Adler. I think this is from the 70s or the 80s, and so it was picked. It came out. It was read. It was reasonably popular. Then it went out of print, and it was available for them to republish. And I think there's. I'll stop putting my hand in the screen. Sorry, but that's another way of looking at it. So if it's in one of these reprint series, you might consider it a classic, though that's going to be more open to interpretation. Now, I did, when I was thinking about this, look around on YouTube, and I saw a young woman talking about books she thinks are going to be classics in the future, and she named Percy Jackson and the Olympians. This is the young adult series, and that got me thinking. I haven't read that series. And she also named Harry Potter. So these these are books. It's interesting because they draw on other classics, like the Olympians are the gods of the ancient Greeks and Romans. So that's going to draw on Homer and all those original classics from the ancient world. And probably some of their appeal, I'm guessing, is because it carries this freight, this of reference to the old Western classics. So those are some thoughts, and there are other ways of thinking about it, but those are my thoughts on it. And I'll say thanks for watching. Bye.